You know, there's one genre of photography that is, I think, much misunderstood by those who work in the photographic world. It'd be fair to say that weddings get a reasonably harsh rap in the business of image making, as if they're something that's somehow not as proper as, say, fashion, sport or editorial photography. I've, at the time of recording this, shot nearly 800 of these incredible life events myself, but I still get asked if this is my full-time job or what do I do for a real job. There are, though, in the genre of wedding photography, some amazing characters, some incredible professionals, photographers for whom wedding work isn't the Voldemort of artistic direction, photographers who have a pedigree and skill that's as real as any celebrated creator in, say, fashion. So here's a short film about Paul Rogers, formerly a newspaperman, who tells a great story pictorially. And he still does. He just happens to now do this at weddings.
When I decided to shoot weddings, I knew that I had to do it in a documentary way. It had to be the way that I've been working for the last 20 years. I avoided weddings for 16 years because of the preconception of the wedding photographer and the staged pictures and the cheesy moments that you set up. I think as long as you can carry on working in the way that you love working, and you can show the images that really excite you as a photographer, it doesn't really matter what the subject is. It's all about photographing people and emotions and relationships, and whether that's in a news story or at a wedding, it's irrelevant to me. It's the thrill of the chase of trying to capture that moment and nail that image. This image was taken in 2003, and it's a trip I made to Iraqi Kurdistan during the Second Gulf War. I travelled into the country via Iran, and it was quite a long journey over the mountains into Kurdistan. And I spent the next 2 or 3 months with the Peshmerga, the Kurdish fighters there, and it was before the American invasion of Iraq and in the lead up to Baghdad being taken. And my brief, again, I was shooting for the Times here, my brief was to wait for the US forces to come in through Turkey, through the north. A lot of the time when you're working in a war environment, you're spending most of your time on logistics, so you're trying to find safe places to stay, trying to find interpreters, fixers, and the actual photography and storytelling is a very small part of the day-to-day work. But we'd spent a fair amount of time with some Peshmerga who they had a bit of a sideline going on. So as well as trying to protect the local villages and prepare for the invasion to try and oust Saddam's troops, they were going around, and this particular guy in this picture, his sideline was collecting landmines and unexploded ordnance. And what they used to do was they would take the explosives out of the landmines, reassemble them into fishing devices, essentially, where they would detonate them in lakes, and the fishermen would then scoop up the stunned fish. Now, at this point, there's the bridge behind this guy swimming has been blown by the Iraqi forces as they withdrew, and a couple of landmines had landed in the water here. So this guy's dived in, trying to fish them out. It's the kind of picture that works for me in that it's a pretty complex story, this part of the war with the Kurdish Peshmerga. And trying to tell that story in single images is a very hard thing to do. So to take a small segment of a story and sum it up in a picture like this is really important. This picture was taken back in 2010 when I was working for the Times newspaper, and we'd gone out to Congo to photograph the work of a UK charity called Merlin. And what they do is they set up health centres in the middle of nowhere and help train the staff to deal with local health issues. We travelled quite a distance to get to this place on a plane, I think, a boat and part way on foot. And we'd only been there a few minutes. We were talking to the doctors, and this guy stumbled in, and he looked awful. It turns out that he'd been walking for 3 days to get to this health centre, and it was simply a case of diarrhoea. Now, without this health centre, this guy probably wouldn't have made it. And while we were talking to the doctors, they another set of doctors put an IV drip in, got him looking a little bit more healthy. We went back to photograph him. And this particular moment that I'm looking at now is the moment that he takes his first gulp of water for probably 2 days while he's been walking through the bush there. And to capture a moment like that in a news photograph is a pretty important thing. Taking that to the way I work now is, again, trying to simplify complex images and complex scenes, and looking for good separation between the subject and the background, looking for good leading lines and ways of focusing the viewer's attention to what you want them to see. Part of documentary photography, I think, is about blending in and trying to become invisible really to your subjects. But I think to get the kind of pictures that you need to get, sometimes you have to push yourself out of your comfort zone. And taking that to weddings, I try, obviously it's a different scenario in that you're invited into a wedding and everyone there is comfortable with you photographing them. But sometimes you need to get into an uncomfortable space, uncomfortably close, to get the pictures that you need to get. And I think that's an important aspect of documenting a day. Everyone has their own take on a situation, and part of what your clients are paying you for is your take, and hopefully they will have seen your work and how you see the world, and that's as important as any aspect when choosing a photographer. Of course, if you take 10 photographers in one situation, you're going to get 10 different pictures out of that scene, and it's a very personal thing, from the lens you choose, the moment you capture, your processing. Part of that has got to be a truthful way of representing what happened, but part of it is obviously your idea of how that moment looked. Most photographers will know that the three important elements that you need for a picture are light, composition and moment. And that's what I'm looking for, and what I hope I found in this picture. It's shot through a doorway during the preparations, and the preparations for me is a good time for the bride to get used to having a photographer around, and also for me to get used to the dynamics in the room. At this particular wedding, it was nice in that it was just the bride and her sister, and so there were some nice, quiet, tender moments. I could see this picture, and I knew the composition that I wanted. I didn't know that she was going to stand right in the centre of the doorway for me, or in fact turn and look into the light at this particular moment. But all you can do as a photographer is set the scene and hope that the elements fall into place. I've got the composition, the light is good, and the moment is something you have to wait for. It may have happened like this, it may not have. It doesn't matter, you just shoot what's there and hope that you've waited long enough to capture the moment as well. There's many ways of shooting the same scene. You put your own stamp onto that, but you have to bear in mind that these are the images that are going to live with a couple for the rest of their lives, and as well as making them feel good about their day, you have to tell an accurate story.